You smell like gasoline and sweat, you're nobody." Her words brought every conversation to a halt. The soft jazz faded beneath the shock. Every head turned toward the tall woman in the white blazer, her heels sharp as her tone. Daniel Carter stood frozen with a cardboard box in his hands, a bead of sweat running down his temple. His gray uniform was stained with the day's labor, the faint scent of fuel and heat clinging to his shirt. He had spent 14 hours on the road, the city pressing on his back like a weight. He just wanted to finish this last delivery, pick up his kids from after-school care, and go home. Caroline Sandoval, 27, CEO of the hotel, daughter of a man whose name was printed on every luxury magazine in New York, crossed her arms. "You people should use the service entrance. This lobby isn't for deliveries." The way she said it, deliveries, dripped with disgust. Daniel's jaw tightened. He glanced around. Employees froze. A few lowered their eyes. The concierge, Esteban, shifted nervously behind the front desk. Rosa, the elderly housekeeper, whispered a prayer in Spanish. Caroline stepped closer. "I said, use the back." Daniel took a breath, steady but deep. "Ma'am, this package is for Mr. Ernest Alvarez. It's urgent medication. They asked for direct delivery." She laughed, brittle. "And what? You think carrying a box makes you special? Rules exist for a reason. Go around." For a moment, Daniel almost did. He could have turned, swallowed the sting, done his job quietly. But something inside him refused. He looked her straight in the eye. "You're right, ma'am. I don't have money or a suit. But I've got something. You seem to have lost self-respect." The words hung heavy, echoing off the chandeliered ceiling. The room went still. Even the fountain seemed to stop its flow. Caroline's face hardened. A faint red crept up her neck. "Get out," she said. Daniel nodded slowly. "I will, ma'am. Through the back door, like you said. But remember, some doors close on dignity, not people." He turned and walked away, the box steady in his hands. No one spoke. The sound of his boots on the marble floor was louder than any applause. Outside, the afternoon heat wrapped around him like a blanket. The city roared beyond the glass walls of the hotel, horns, footsteps, the hum of real life. Daniel paused at the corner, looked up at the towering building that gleamed like ice under the Sunday inside. She lived in air conditioning and polish. Outside, he carried sweat and truth. His phone buzzed. Zoe's photo lit the screen, a missing front tooth and a smile wide enough to erase the weight of the world. "Daddy, are you coming home soon?" she'd texted earlier. He typed back, almost, "baby girl." He found the service entrance. It smelled like metal, detergent, and old grease. A cook in a stained apron nodded at him. "They got you using the back too, huh?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Guess it's where we belong today." The elevator creaked as he stepped in. Its mirror was cracked, reflecting pieces of him that didn't quite line up. His eyes tired, his hands steady. When the doors opened on the 8th floor, Mr. Ernest Alvarez was waiting, breathing unevenly, one hand on his chest. "You're the courier?" "Yes, sir. Your medication." Daniel handed over the box. Alvarez tore it open, fumbled for the pills, swallowed them dry. A minute passed. The color slowly returned to his face. "You just saved me a trip to the hospital." He looked at Daniel closely, the kind of look that sees through exhaustion. "You're the young man from downstairs, aren't you?" Daniel hesitated. "Yes, sir. I heard the shouting. People forget who built the floor they're standing on. 40 years ago, I delivered bread in this same neighborhood." Alvarez smiled faintly. "Don't ever let anyone teach your children that decency is weakness." Daniel nodded, the words burning into him like a quiet brand. "Thank you, sir." As he left, the hum of the hotel swallowed him again. In the hallway, mirrors reflected everything. He was not polished shoes, silk ties, laughter that cost money. But Daniel walked taller now, not because he'd won anything, but because he hadn't lost himself. Down in the lobby, Caroline was still standing where he'd left her. The echo of his words wouldn't fade. Her assistant hovered nearby. "Miss Sandoval, should I call security?" She didn't answer. For the first time, her reflection in the marble floor looked unfamiliar, her posture too rigid, her eyes too sharp. She loosened her pearl necklace, the one her grandmother had given her, and suddenly it felt heavy. Later that night, in her penthouse overlooking the city, Caroline poured herself a glass of wine she didn't want. She watched the lights flicker on the streets below taxis, pedestrians, people living lives that had nothing to do with her. Somewhere out there, that man with the box and the tired eyes was tucking in his kids, and she couldn't stop hearing his voice. "You seem to have lost self-respect." Her phone rang. "Caroline," said her father, Richard Sandoval, voice low and commanding. "I just got a call from Ernest Alvarez. He said a delivery man saved his life tonight and that you almost stopped him." Silence filled the line. "Is it true?" "I was enforcing policy," she muttered. "Policy," her father repeated, cold. "Your grandfather built this hotel for people, not for rules. Remember that." He hung up before she could answer. Caroline sat in the quiet, the wine untouched. She looked at her hands, perfectly manicured, trembling slightly. She thought of his voice, calm, firm, human. In that moment, she felt something new, uncomfortable, and true. It wasn't guilt, it was shame. Across town, Daniel parked his old Ford near his building. Zoe's laughter echoed down the hall when she opened the door. "Daddy!" Miles ran into his arms, holding up a crayon drawing 3 stick figures under a yellow sundae. "That's you," Zoe said proudly. "You're smiling." Daniel laughed, a sound that filled the small apartment with light. He sat by the window later, city lights blinking outside, the same lights reflected on his rough hands. He didn't know that the woman who had humiliated him now sat alone, questioning everything she'd ever believed. But maybe that didn't matter, because tonight he'd done the right thing, and that was enough. Somewhere between the marble of the Grand Empress and the cracked paint of his apartment wall, the line between nobody and somebody blurred into something else, something better: dignity. The next morning began like every other gray light bleeding through the cracked blinds, the city already alive with horns and distant sirens. Daniel stirred before the alarm, muscles aching from the weight of yesterday. For a long moment he lay still, listening to the soft breathing of his children in the next room. It was the only sound that reminded him why he kept moving, why every insult, every closed door, was worth enduring. He rose quietly, tiptoeing past the sleeping forms of Zoe and Miles. The apartment was small, one of those aging buildings in Harlem that smelled faintly of old paint and toast. The kitchen light flickered. On the table sat 2 lunch boxes, Zoe's decorated with stickers, Miles's wrapped with duct tape because the latch broke months ago. He poured coffee into a chipped mug, black and bitter, and looked at the city skyline through the window. It was distant, cold, beautiful in its own indifferent way. He thought of the hotel again, of her voice. The words replayed in his head, not as anger anymore, but as a test he had passed. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't folded. He'd stood his ground, and in some quiet corner of his heart, that meant victory. Zoe's voice broke the silence. "Daddy, you're up early." She rubbed her eyes, hair messy, wearing her pink pajamas covered with stars. "Can you braid my hair like last time?" "Sure thing, sunshine," he said, pulling a comb from the counter. She climbed onto a stool, swinging her feet. "You smell like work," she teased. "That's the smell of superheroes," he said, smiling. "Gasoline and sweat?" "Exactly. The kind of smell that gets things done." She laughed, leaning into him. It was a sound that cleared the heaviness from the morning. After dropping the kids at school, Daniel started his delivery shift again. Same streets, same traffic, same strangers avoiding his eyes. The world didn't care who you were, but sometimes that was comforting. It treated everyone the same until someone like Caroline decided otherwise. Still, he had work. He had responsibility. That was enough. By noon, he stopped at a diner he liked on 145th Street. The waitress, Gloria, slid him a plate before he ordered 2 eggs, bacon, and toast. "You look beat, honey," she said. "Long night?" "Long life," he replied with a grin. "You ever sleep?" "Only on Sundays if the Lord insists," she chuckled. They talked for a few minutes about nothing: the weather, the Knicks, rent going up again. These were his people, the invisible ones who held the city together while the wealthy pretended not to see. As he left the diner, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mr. Carter?" The voice was formal, female. "This is Angela from the Grand Empress. Miss Sandoval would like to schedule a brief meeting to discuss for yesterday's misunderstanding." Daniel froze. "Misunderstanding?" "Yes, sir. She'd like to offer an apology and ensure there are no hard feelings." Hard feelings. The phrase tasted strange. He wanted to laugh. "Sure," he said finally. "When?" "Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. "All right." He hung up, the phone warm in his palm. An apology from someone like her? Maybe it was PR. Maybe her lawyers told her to. It didn't matter. But deep down, curiosity tugged at him. People like Caroline didn't say sorry, they hired people to clean the word from their vocabulary. That evening, after finishing his route, Daniel walked the kids to the park. Zoe climbed the swings, shouting, "Higher, Daddy!" He pushed gently, watching her rise toward the sunset, laughing as the wind caught her braids. Miles chased pigeons, fearless and loud. For a moment, Daniel forgot the hotel, forgot the sting of that voice. This was his world, small, noisy, imperfect, but real. When they got home, he reheated leftover spaghetti. Zoe set the table. Miles turned on the tiny radio that never quite caught the right station. Jazz mixed with static filled the room. "Daddy," Zoe said between bites, "what's a nobody?" Daniel paused, fork midair. "Where did you hear that?" "A kid at school said his mom called someone that on TV." She looked up at him, waiting. He took a breath. "A nobody is just a word people use when they forget others matter. But everyone matters, even when the world forgets." "Even you?" she asked. "Especially me," he said, smiling. Across the city, Caroline stared at the glowing skyline from her penthouse. The night didn't comfort her the way it used to. Her father's voice from the phone still echoed, "Your grandfather built this hotel for people, not rules." She sat at her desk, flipping through reports she couldn't focus on. Her assistant Lillian stood by the door. "You have a meeting tomorrow with the delivery man," Lillian reminded. Caroline's expression tightened. "Yes, Mr. Carter. Do you want me to draft an apology?" "No," she said after a pause. "I'll handle it myself." When Lillian left, Caroline exhaled slowly. The idea of facing him made her uneasy in a way she didn't understand. Maybe it wasn't about the embarrassment or the press, it was about what she'd seen in his eyes when he spoke to her. Calm, unbroken. She had all the power, and somehow he'd been the one in control. In her living room, a framed photo of her father stared down from the wall. His expression in that photo was the same as always. Distant pride, expectations carved in stone. She poured herself water, not wine this time, and whispered to the empty room, "Maybe I went too far." The next day, Daniel arrived at the hotel 5 minutes early. The same marble lobby, the same smell of expensive perfume. But today, people looked at him differently. Rosa greeted him quietly near the elevators, her eyes kind but cautious. "Be careful," she murmured. "The Ice Queen doesn't melt easy." He smiled. "I'm not here to fight." "That's why you'll win," she said. Caroline's office was all glass and sunlight. She stood when he entered, which surprised him. "Mr. Carter," she said, gesturing to a seat. He remained standing. "I won't take much of your time." "Go ahead," he replied. She cleared her throat. "About what happened yesterday, my behavior was unacceptable. I was under pressure, and I let that affect my judgment. I'm sorry." The words were smooth, practiced. Daniel studied her face. The apology was real enough on the surface, but her eyes stayed guarded, cold. "I appreciate that," he said evenly. "But respect isn't just words, Miss Sandoval. It's what you do next." She blinked, thrown off. "Meaning?" "2 of your staff, Rosa and Esteban, were punished for being near what happened. Lift those warnings. And when someone brings medicine to save a life, maybe don't make them use the back door." For the first time, Caroline looked uncertain. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Consider it done." He gave a brief nod, ready to leave. "Mr. Carter," she said quickly, "for what it's worth, I do admire your composure. Not everyone can hold their dignity under pressure." He looked back at her, calm. "Pressure doesn't take dignity away, ma'am. It just shows who never had it." Then he left, the door closing softly behind him. Carolyn stood in silence. Outside, the city hummed, alive, and unaware that something small but irreversible had shifted inside her. Daniel walked out into the sun, the air thick with exhaust and life. His phone buzzed again, Zoe's text. "We're drawing heroes today. I'm making you one." He smiled, and for the first time since the lobby, the weight on his chest eased. The day felt lighter, almost kind. Back in her glass tower, Caroline picked up her grandmother's pearl necklace from the desk. For the first time, It felt less like pride and more like a question she didn't yet know how to answer. The following morning, sunlight crept across the city like a slow tide. Caroline sat in her car outside her father's townhouse in the Upper East Side, staring at the front steps. She hadn't planned to visit, but the sleepless night had driven her here. When she finally rang the bell, Richard Sandoval opened the door himself. His silver hair was combed perfectly, his expression unreadable. "Caroline," he said, "you look tired." "I didn't come for coffee," she answered, her voice thin. "I wanted to talk." He gestured her in. The house smelled like old wood and lemon polish, everything precise. "I hear there's been a situation at the hotel," he said, settling into his chair. "Ernest Alvarez called me personally, told me you almost cost him his life." "He's exaggerating," she began, but he cut her off. "Is he?" He said a delivery man saved him because you refused to let him through the lobby. "Is that true?" Caroline hesitated. "I was following procedure." Richard's eyes hardened. "Procedure? Your grandfather wrote those rules to protect our workers, not to humiliate them. You turned them into a wall." She dropped her gaze. "I made a mistake that went viral," he said sharply. "Do you understand how fast reputation burns in this city? One match, and the whole house goes up." He paused, his tone lowering. "You're running this hotel with emotion, not logic. You act on feeling, not reason. That makes you weak." The words hit harder than she expected. "I'm not weak." "Then prove it," he said, standing. "Fix what you broke. And remember, power isn't control, it's responsibility." He left her sitting there, small against the grand furniture. On her way out, she caught her reflection in the glass door. For a fleeting second, she saw not the woman who owned the room, but the one who'd been exposed by a single man's calm eyes. That night, Daniel finished his route early. The city smelled of rain, streets slick and shining. He stopped by a small grocery store where Zoe liked the cookies, shaped like stars. The cashier, a teenager with earbuds, didn't look up. "Hey man," Daniel said lightly, "keep the change for someone who needs it." The boy mumbled thanks without meeting his gaze. Outside, thunder rolled. The sky darkened, promising another storm. He thought of the meeting yesterday, the way she'd said sorry, the way she'd looked at him afterward. Something about her apology had felt unfinished, like a door only half closed. Back at home, Zoe and Miles were sprawled on the floor, crayons scattered, the TV humming softly. Zoe held up her drawing, him with a cape, a bright yellow sun behind. "You're the strongest daddy," she said. He laughed. "Strong? Maybe just stubborn." "Same thing," she giggled. He kissed her forehead. "Maybe you're right." When they were asleep, he sat by the window, coffee steaming in his hand, city lights stretching to the river. He thought of his father, a mechanic who died when Daniel was 12. "Never bow your head unless you're fixing an engine," his father used to say. He wondered what his old man would think if he saw him now still fighting, still trying to keep his dignity clean in a world that loved to dirty it. The next day at the Grand Empress, Caroline walked the staff corridor, the one Daniel had used. The fluorescent lights flickered, the air thick with detergent and metal. Workers stared as she passed. She stopped when she saw Rosa polishing a cart. "Rosa," she said softly. The older woman froze. "Ma'am? I heard you were written up for being near the lobby incident." "Yes, ma'am," Rosa said, cautious. "Not anymore. I've cleared it. You shouldn't have been punished." Rosa blinked, unsure. "Thank you," she murmured. Caroline nodded and walked on, the hallway suddenly too narrow, too human. Upstairs, Esteban was at the front desk when she approached. "Miss Sandoval," he said, straightening nervously. "Relax," she told him. "Your record's been cleared too." "Ma'am?" "It was unfair. That won't happen again." He hesitated, then smiled, a small, cautious smile, but real. For the first time in years, Caroline felt something like relief. Maybe her father was right. Maybe power wasn't control at all. Meanwhile, Daniel's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Mr. Carter, this is Mr. Alvarez. I'd like to invite you to lunch tomorrow. My treat." Daniel frowned, surprised. "You saved my life," the next text read. "I'd like to talk about yours." The following day, Daniel met Alvarez at a quiet restaurant near Central Park. Alvarez was already seated, wearing a linen suit and an easy smile. "You look better than I did last week," the older man said. "You ever take a day off?" Not since 2019, Daniel joked. Alvarez chuckled. I like that. But I didn't ask you here just to thank you. I saw something that day in the lobby, something people forget exists. Dignity. You handled cruelty with grace. That's rare. Daniel shifted, uncomfortable. Just did what I had to. That's exactly it, Alvarez said. I started where you are. I know the smell of oil and concrete. Don't let it convince you you're small. He leaned forward. People like Miss Sandoval, when they break, they don't need punishment. They need reminders. You gave her one. Daniel frowned. She didn't seem like someone who listens. Maybe not yet, Alvarez said, smiling. But lessons like yours don't fade easily. When they parted, Alvarez shook his hand firmly. Keep your head up, son. The world will try to make you bow. Daniel walked out into the park, the breeze cool and clean. Kids played near the fountain, laughter carrying on the wind. For a moment, he imagined Zoe and Miles there, older, freer. Maybe by the time they grew up, the world would treat them differently. Or maybe it wouldn't, but they'd know how to stand tall anyway. That evening, Caroline opened an email from HR. All disciplinary records related to the delivery incident have been cleared. Attached was a note from Alvarez himself. We build walls with pride. Sometimes it takes a stranger to open a door. She sat back, staring at the screen. For the first time, gratitude felt heavier than guilt. Outside her office window, Manhattan glittered like a living thing, ruthless, beautiful, indifferent. And somewhere out there, a man she'd dismissed as nobody had just changed her idea of what somebody really meant. When she left work, the lobby was quiet. She passed the service elevator, the same one she'd forbidden him to use. Her reflection appeared faint in its metal doors. She touched the cold surface, whispered to herself, maybe the wrong door teaches you the right lesson. The elevator dinged, empty. She didn't step inside. Not yet. The rain started before dawn, soft at first, then steady, washing the city in silver. Daniel pulled his jacket tight as he crossed Broadway, coffee steaming in his hand. The streets were quieter than usual, the kind of morning that made New York feel almost kind. He was halfway through his shift when his phone buzzed an unknown number again. Mr. Carter, this is the Grand Empress. Mr. Alvarez requests a follow-up delivery at 10 a.m. Please confirm. Daniel sighed but texted back, confirmed. He tried not to think too much about it, but a flicker of curiosity lingered. A part of him wondered if he'd see her again. When he arrived at the hotel, the rain had turned to mist. The marble floor shone like glass, and for the first time, no one stopped him from walking through the main doors. Rosa nodded discreetly as he passed. Good luck, Mijo, she whispered. He smiled back. At the front desk, Esteban greeted him with warmth instead of hesitation. Mr. Alvarez is expecting you, sir. Sir, that word, simple as it was, felt heavier than it should have. In the elevator, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish, the same scent as that day, but the silence was softer now, less judgmental. When the doors opened, Alvarez was standing by the window, looking out over Central Park, his oxygen tank humming softly. Daniel, he said warmly. Come in, son. Daniel handed him the small package. Just your prescription refills, sir. And right on time, as always. Alvarez took the box, set it on the table, and turned with a faint smile. How's life treating you? Same as always, Daniel said. I work, I go home, I try not to think too much. Thinking too much is a disease of the rich, Alvarez said with a chuckle. We poor folks survive because we're too busy moving to overthink. Then, his voice softened. Do you know why I asked for you again? Daniel shook his head. Because I wanted you to see something. He handed Daniel an envelope. Inside was a printed memo, the Grand Empress official letterhead, signed by Caroline Sandoval. It read, Effective immediately, all emergency deliveries shall be allowed entry through the main lobby without restriction. Additionally, disciplinary actions taken against staff related to the lobby incident have been rescinded. At the bottom, a note in her handwriting, Respect begins at every door. Daniel exhaled slowly, unsure what to feel. She did that? Alvarez nodded. I told you lessons like yours don't fade. Even the proudest hearts can learn humility if they're shown what it looks like. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. You gave her something no one else could. You gave her a mirror. Daniel nodded, feeling a quiet pride settle deep in his chest. I just stood my ground, sir. Sometimes that's the hardest thing a man can do, Alvarez said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have another meeting, one that concerns you. In fact, he smiled cryptically. Don't worry, it's good news. Daniel thanked him and turned to leave. As he stepped into the hallway, he nearly collided with Caroline. She was wearing a dark green suit, simple but elegant, her hair tied back. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said, Mr. Carter. He nodded politely. Miss Sandoval. She hesitated, then gestured toward the sitting area. Do you have a moment? Daniel considered it. I'm on the clock, but sure. They sat across from each other, a glass table between them. The rain outside had turned the city gray, and the light from the window cast soft reflections across the room. I wanted to thank you, she said finally. For what? For not giving me what I deserved that day. You could have humiliated me back, and you didn't. Her voice was low, measured. I've been thinking about that moment more than I'd like to admit. Daniel watched her carefully. You were angry, he said. People say things when they're angry. It's what they do next that matters. Well, she said, a small smile flickering. I'm trying to do better next. He nodded, appreciating her honesty. Then you're already doing more than most. She looked at him, eyes clearer than he remembered. Do you believe people can change, Mr. Carter? I believe they can choose to, he said simply. But they have to want it more than they want to be right. Caroline nodded slowly, her gaze drifting toward the window. You know, my father said something similar once. He told me power without humility is poison. Smart man, Daniel said. She let out a small laugh. He's not usually wrong, though he never lets me forget it. Fathers tend to do that, Daniel replied. They think it's their job to make us tougher. Did yours? She asked quietly. Yeah, he said, smiling faintly. A mechanic. Taught me everything I know about standing tall, even when people look down on you. Caroline looked down at her hands. He must have been proud. He was, Daniel said softly, before he passed. Silence filled the space again, but it wasn't awkward. It was heavy in the way understanding can be wordless, honest. Caroline finally rose. Thank you for talking with me. Thank you for listening, he said. As he turned to leave, she added, Mr. Carter, one more thing. You were right that day. He glanced back. About what? Self, respect. I thought it came from reputation. Turns out, it comes from conscience. He gave a small nod, almost a smile. Glad you found that out for yourself. That evening, Daniel walked through Harlem with the rain still falling in thin sheets. He stopped at a crosswalk, watching people rush by umbrellas, briefcases, tired faces. Somewhere, a street musician played a trumpet under a bridge, notes echoing soft and blue. Life went on. It always did. He checked his phone. Zoe had texted a picture, a drawing of a stick figure standing tall under falling rain. The words, "My daddy is strong," written in bright letters. He smiled, pocketed the phone, and kept walking. Back in her office, Caroline stared at the same city, her reflection overlapping the skyline. She reached into her drawer, pulled out her grandmother's pearl necklace, and turned it over in her palm. For the first time, it didn't feel like power, it felt like a reminder of how easily pride could choke the heart. She set it down gently on her desk and whispered, "Some doors are meant to stay open." The rain continued to fall, steady and forgiving, washing the glass clean. It began with a whisper and a flash, the kind of scandal that travels faster than truth. By Monday morning, the Grand Empress Hotel was on every newsfeed in the city. A grainy cell phone video had surfaced. Caroline Sandoval, standing in the lobby, her voice sharp, her hand slicing the air. "You smell like gasoline and sweat. You're nobody." The caption beneath read, "Luxury Hotel CEO humiliates delivery driver during emergency medical delivery." Daniel's face was blurred, but his posture the quiet defiance. The calm made the moment unforgettable. Within hours, the clip had gone viral. The internet devoured it. Headlines screamed class war in Manhattan. Comment sections split in two, some defending protocol, others calling her heartless. Late-night shows replayed the scene, comedians mimicking her accent. By noon, the PR department at the Sandoval Group was in full crisis mode. Caroline sat at the head of a long glass table in the conference room, her face pale but composed. Around her, advisors, attorneys, and board members buzzed like hornets. "Damage control," said one. "We issue a formal apology immediately." "It's already written," said another, sliding a document toward her. "We'll post it online by 3. "We need to distance the company from the incident," added a man in a navy suit. "Say you were misinformed. Say you didn't realize the delivery was urgent." Caroline stared at the paper without touching it. The words were clean, corporate, empty. "We regret the misunderstanding. We value every member of our community." Lies wrapped in politeness. "This isn't a misunderstanding," she said finally. The room fell silent. "Miss Sandoval," one advisor began carefully, "with respect, we have shareholders to consider. This is about reputation, not guilt." She looked up. "Maybe that's the problem." Richard Sandoval entered the room then, silent as a shadow. Conversations died instantly. The board members straightened, nervous. "Leave us," he said. The room emptied. He stood at the far end of the table, looking at his daughter for a long moment. "You've made quite a mess." "I know. Do you?" His tone was calm, but cold. "The internet is tearing you apart. They're not wrong to." Caroline clenched her jaw. "I've apologized." "To whom? To the public? That's not repentance. That's theater." He stepped closer. "Tell me, when was the last time you looked someone like that man in the eye and saw a human being?" "I'm not heartless," she said, the words too fast, too defensive. "I was following the rules," Richard scoffed. "Rules don't make leaders, they expose them." He turned toward the window, the city reflected in the glass. "Your grandfather built this empire from the ground up, and he never once forgot where the ground was." Caroline looked down at her hands. "What do you want me to do?" "Fix it," he said simply. "Before it fixes you." He left without another word. That night, the hotel's social media pages overflowed with hate. Customers canceled reservations. Reporters camped outside the lobby. Inside her office, Caroline stared at the glow of her monitor, reading thousands of strangers' opinions about her soul. A knock came at the door. It was Lillian, her assistant, holding an envelope. "This came for you, ma'am. No sender." Caroline opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Respect begins at every door." Her chest tightened. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. "You seem to have lost self-respect." The next morning, she gathered the staff. The ballroom was half-lit, rows of employees watching in wary silence. "I owe you all something," she began, her voice steady but low. "An apology, not the kind written by lawyers, but the kind that admits truth." Murmurs rippled through the room. "I humiliated someone who didn't deserve it. I punished 2 of our own for being witnesses. That's not leadership, it's arrogance. I forgot that every person who walks through these doors, front or back, carries the same dignity." She took a breath, looked out over the crowd. "I can't erase what I did, but I can start correcting what I've allowed." When she finished, the room was silent. Then Rosa, small and gray-haired, stepped forward. "We all make mistakes, ma'am," she said softly. "What matters is who learns from them." Caroline nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you." The applause that followed was hesitant, but real. Later, alone in her office, she saw her reflection in the window again, but this time, it didn't look like the villain from the video. It looked like someone trying to find her way back to herself. Across the city, Daniel was at a small cafe between deliveries. The TV above the counter was replaying the news Caroline's public statement. The clip showed her voice shaking slightly, eyes bright but steady. He watched in silence. "That the lady who yelled at you?" the cashier asked, sliding him a muffin. "Yeah," Daniel said. "Looks like she's sorry now." "You gonna forgive her?" "Already did," he said simply. That evening, as he picked up his kids, Zoe asked, "Daddy, why do people on TV look angry?" He smiled softly. "Because they forgot how to listen, sweetheart." "Did you make them remember?" she asked innocently. He thought for a moment. "Maybe a little." That night, as the city buzzed and screens flickered, 2 people lay awake in different parts of Manhattan. One was a man who had nothing but pride. The other was a woman who had everything but peace. And somewhere between them, a quiet balance began to shift. Caroline turned off her phone, the echo of applause still lingering in her ears. She whispered into the dark, "Dignity isn't silence. It's courage." Across the river, Daniel whispered to his children's sleeping faces, "Some days you win by walking away." The storm outside eased, the city lights glimmering like second chances. A week passed before their paths crossed again, not by invitation but by accident. The morning sun was barely up, spilling gold over the city as Caroline descended to the lower floors of the Grand Empress with her technical inspection team. It was a routine safety audit: elevators, fire exits, electrical systems. She liked precision now, the quiet of the service corridors, where no one bowed their heads when she passed. Her heels clicked against the tiled floor, echoing through the narrow hallway. "We'll start with the freight elevator," the head technician said, checking his clipboard. "It's due for maintenance testing." She nodded absently, her mind elsewhere. Then, as the elevator doors slid open, she froze. Daniel stood inside, holding a delivery cart stacked with supplies. Their eyes met, and time seemed to pause. He looked the same, tired, calm, resolute, but his surprise was tempered by something like quiet amusement. "Miss Sandoval," he said evenly. "Mr. Carter." Her tone was polite, clipped. "Here for another inspection?" he asked. "Routine procedure?" she replied. "And you?" "Same thing I always do," he said, pressing the elevator button. The doors began to close, but one of her team members stopped them. "Ma'am, it's fine. It'll save us a trip," the man said. "We'll ride with him." She hesitated, then stepped inside. The elevator groaned as the doors shut. It began its slow ascent, humming faintly. The atmosphere was awkward, a tension balanced between civility and memory. One of the younger technicians snickered quietly, exchanging glances with another. Caroline caught at a spark of mockery she couldn't quite place. "Something funny?" she asked sharply. "No, ma'am," the man said, grinning. "Just didn't expect to see you riding the service lift. Bit of a downgrade, isn't it?" His tone carried the faintest edge. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Watch your mouth," he said quietly. The man laughed under his breath. "Easy there, hero. We've all seen the video." Caroline's face stiffened, embarrassment flashing across her features. The technician smirked. "Bet she's not as brave in person, huh?" Before anyone could respond, the elevator jolted violently and stopped. The lights flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed them. "What the hell?" one of the technicians muttered. The emergency light flickered dimly overhead, casting pale shadows on their faces. The air was suddenly heavy, the hum of machinery replaced by the low groan of silence. "We're stuck," another technician said, hitting the control panel. "Power outage. The system's dead." Caroline stepped forward, trying to steady her voice. "Call maintenance." "No signal," the man replied, tapping his phone. Panic crept into her chest like ice. The walls felt closer now. She pressed a hand to her collarbone, breathing faster, Daniel noticed. "Hey," he said calmly. "Slow down. It's just the power. They'll fix it." "I'm fine," she lied, her breathing shallow. The light flickered again, dimmer this time. The air felt thinner. The technicians began muttering among themselves, one of them chuckling low. "Guess karma's real, huh?" Caroline turned sharply. "Excuse me? You, trapped in an elevator with the delivery guy you humiliated. You got to admit that's poetic." The others laughed, mean and nervous. Daniel's patience snapped. "Enough," he said firmly. His voice filled the small space with authority. "She's scared. You think that's funny?" "Relax, man," the technician sneered. "You're not her bodyguard." "No," Daniel said, stepping closer, "but I'm not a coward either." The man opened his mouth to retort, but the elevator shuddered again, cutting him off. Caroline stumbled backward, her hand clutching the rail. Her breath came quick and shallow now, panic breaking through her composure. "I can't breathe," she gasped. Daniel turned instantly, moving toward her. "Hey, look at me. Slow down. You're hyperventilating." She shook her head, eyes wide. "I can't." Her knees buckled. He caught her before she hit the floor, easing her down gently. "Back up," he told the others. "Give her air." They hesitated, still smirking, until his glare silenced them. "Caroline," he said, his voice steady but soft. "You're okay. Listen to me. In through your nose, out through your mouth, slowly." She tried, but her body refused to obey. Her lips were pale now, her breaths ragged. He leaned closer, gauging her pulse. "She's fainting," he muttered. The technician stood frozen. "Do something," one said uncertainly. "You were laughing a minute ago," Daniel snapped. Then, without hesitation, he tilted her chin and began CPR. One breath, two, steady and controlled. After a few tense seconds, she coughed, gasping for air. Her eyes fluttered open, disoriented. "You're fine," he said quietly, hand steady on her shoulder. She blinked, confusion and shame warring across her face. "Don't talk," he said. "Just breathe." The technicians stood silent now, their laughter long gone. After a few minutes, the lights flickered back to life, and the elevator resumed its slow climb. No one spoke. When the doors opened at the next floor, the 3 technicians bolted out first, their faces pale. Caroline remained seated for a moment, still catching her breath. Daniel helped her stand. "You all right?" he asked. "I think so," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he replied. "Just don't forget." She looked at him then, really looked, and the weight of everything she'd done and everything he'd just done hit her all at once. For the first time, she felt small, not from shame, but from humility. As they stepped into the hallway, the technician's supervisor ran up, flustered. "Ma'am, are you hurt? We lost power across 3 floors." "I'm fine," she said quickly, her voice steadier now. She glanced at Daniel. Mr. Carter made sure of that. The supervisor blinked in surprise. Daniel gave a brief nod and started to leave. "Wait," she said quietly. He turned. "I'll handle them," she said, gesturing to the technicians. "They won't work here again." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "They laughed while I couldn't breathe. No one should stand by when someone else is suffering." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Maybe you are changing," he said. "Maybe," she whispered. As he walked away, she felt something new stir inside her, not guilt, not fear, but gratitude. Not the kind that fades, but the kind that reshapes a person. Later that evening, as she stood by her window overlooking the city, she whispered to herself, "Some debts can't be repaid, only honored." And somewhere across town, Daniel tucked his children into bed, unaware that his calm strength had just saved the same woman who once tried to crush his dignity. The incident in the elevator never reached the news, but it changed the quiet rhythm of the Grand Empress in ways no headline could. Within days, word spread among the staff that Daniel Carter, the delivery man once humiliated, had saved the CEO's life. The story traveled from the maintenance rooms to the kitchens, whispered in hallways, retold over coffee cups and cigarette breaks. The same people who had once feared Caroline now looked at her differently, some with curiosity, others with the faint beginnings of respect, and she felt it too, a subtle shift in the air. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but something that resembled belief in her humanity again. She walked the hotel floors more often now, not to inspect but to observe, to learn what she had missed. Rosa still greeted her with a cautious nod. Esteban smiled when their paths crossed, and even the bellboys, once afraid to breathe near her, held her gaze without fear. Still, beneath the new calm, there was unease. Her father had not spoken to her since the viral storm. The board remained restless, murmuring about her fragile image. Investors watched closely, and deep down, she knew the storm wasn't over. In a city like New York, stories never die, they just wait for a sequel. A week after the elevator incident, Caroline was called to a board meeting. Richard Sandoval was already seated at the head of the table, flanked by a dozen executives. His silence filled the room heavier than words. "Caroline," one of the board members began, "while we appreciate your efforts to repair our public image, there are concerns about your recent, impulsive behavior." "Impulsive?" she repeated evenly. "If you're referring to my apology, I'd call that overdue, not impulsive." "You dismissed 3 senior technicians without board consultation," another man said sharply. "Their union has filed a grievance." "They mocked a near medical emergency and failed in their duty," Caroline said. "If you want employees who laugh at people in distress, that's your problem, not mine." Her father's voice cut through the tension. "Enough." The room fell silent. "Leave us," he ordered the others. When the door closed, he leaned back, studying her. "So," he said quietly, "I hear you nearly died in an elevator." "I'm fine," she said quickly. "No thanks to the men you just fired." He nodded slightly. "And thanks to a man you once humiliated." "Yes," she admitted. "He saved me." "Why?" "Because he's decent," she said simply. Richard's expression softened barely. "You've learned something then, more than you think." He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. I raised you to lead, not to wound. But maybe this city taught you what I couldn't. Power means nothing if it empties your heart." His voice softened, almost fatherly again. "Do you intend to make things right with him?" She hesitated. "I don't know what right looks like anymore." "Then find out," he said, "before the world tells you again who you are." That night, she couldn't sleep. The sound of the elevator cables from the lower floors haunted her mind, a reminder of both her weakness and his strength. Finally, near midnight, she made a decision. She pulled out her phone and sent a message. "Mr. Carter, this is Caroline Sandoval. I owe you more than a thank you. Could we meet tomorrow? Your choice of place." She hesitated before pressing send, half expecting silence. The reply came 5 minutes later. "There's a diner on 145th Street, noon." The next day, she arrived early. The place was small, filled with the scent of bacon and old coffee. It wasn't her world, the vinyl booths, the buzzing neon sign, but somehow it felt more honest than any of her boardrooms. Daniel walked in a few minutes later, wearing the same gray work shirt, a little more worn at the collar. "You found it," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "I did." She smiled faintly. "It's quieter than I expected. Best pancakes in Harlem," he said. "And the owner doesn't care who you are, long as you tip." They sat in a comfortable silence for a while. Then Carolyn spoke. "I've been trying to think of what to say that doesn't sound like PR or guilt. But I think the truth will do." She met his eyes. "I was cruel. Not just to you, but to everyone who reminded me I wasn't as powerful as I pretended. That day, you could have hated me and no one would have blamed you. But you didn't. You saved me, and I can't stop wondering why." Daniel stirred his coffee slowly. "Because hate's easy," he said. "You don't fix anything by throwing it back. Someone taught me a long time ago that mercy's the only thing that scares cruelty. You believe that?" "I lived it." She nodded slowly. "Your father?" "Yeah," he said softly. "He was a mechanic, worked his whole life, fixing what other people broke. Guess I picked up a little of that." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm one of the things you fixed." "Nah," he said. "You fixed yourself. I just reminded you it could be done." The waitress came by, refilling their cups. Caroline thanked her a small thing, but it didn't go unnoticed. When they were alone again, she reached into her bag and pulled out a document. "I've been working on something," she said, sliding it across the table. It was a proposal letter, stamped with the Grand Empress letterhead, Community Partnership Initiative. Employment opportunities for underprivileged workers. "I want to create training programs for people who don't get second chances," she explained. "Delivery drivers, janitors, single parents, people like you used to be, and I want you to help lead it." Daniel blinked. "Me? Who better?" she asked. "You know what dignity looks like from the ground up." He leaned back, studying her face. "You serious?" "Completely." For the first time since they'd met, she wasn't performing. She was present, honest. He nodded slowly. "All right, but if we do this, we do it right. No speeches, no cameras. Just real work." "Agreed," she said. He smiled slightly. "You might turn out okay, Miss Sandoval." "You too, Mr. Carter." When they left the diner, the afternoon sun had burned away the chill. She extended her hand, and he shook it. Firm, steady, equal. For the first time, no marble walls, no uniforms, no labels stood between them. Just two people who had faced the same city and found a way to walk through it with their heads still high. As she watched him leave, Caroline realized something profound. The world hadn't changed. She had, and maybe that was enough to start something bigger. 3 months later, New York was in the soft heart of spring. The streets pulsed with warmth again, park benches filled, and life moved as if the winter that had nearly broken them all had never existed. The Grand Empress had changed too. It wasn't loud or dramatic, the change lived in small things. The security guards no longer barked at delivery men. The back entrance smelled of fresh paint instead of bleach. A new sign hung near the staff elevator, engraved in brass. Respect begins at every door. Caroline walked the hallways now without the familiar echo of fear behind her. She listened more, spoke less. The staff noticed. Rosa greeted her openly. Esteban called her by name, not title. Even the cooks, who used to fall silent when she entered, now smiled and waved with flour-dusted hands. And while the board still doubted her, The numbers didn't lie, the hotel was thriving again. Guests liked the new tone, the humanness of it all. Somewhere along the way, humility had become its own kind of luxury. But beneath the success was something more personal, something that couldn't be charted in spreadsheets. It was the quiet connection she'd built with Daniel. They met once a week to develop the Community Partnership Initiative. It started with logistics, funding, outreach, then grew into longer conversations about life, fairness, and the strange loneliness that came with trying to do the right thing in a world that rewarded the opposite. Caroline had learned to listen, really listen, the way he did, with stillness, with attention. And Daniel, who once believed the worlds they came from were too far apart to ever touch, began to see how wrong he'd been. One afternoon, they met at the hotel's rooftop terrace, now repurposed as an event space for the new program. The skyline stretched endless around them, the air crisp with possibility. "You ever get used to that view?" Daniel asked, setting down a box of brochures. "Not really," Caroline said. "I used to look at it and see how far above everyone else I was. Now it just reminds me how small everything really is." He smiled faintly. "Perspective's a good thing." "You gave me that," she said. "No," he replied. "Life did. I was just the mirror." The launch event was a week away, and the partnership had drawn attention from across the city. Reporters, philanthropists, even local politicians wanted in. But Caroline didn't care about the spotlight this time. She cared about the people walking through the door for their first chance, a chance no one had ever offered them before. Among them was a single mother from the Bronx, a veteran with a prosthetic leg, a teenager who had aged out of foster care, people who carried stories in their eyes, not on their resumes. Watching them sign their names, she felt something tighten in her chest. Maybe for the first time, the Grand Empress wasn't just hers, it belonged to them too. As they packed up for the day, Caroline's phone buzzed. It was her father. She hesitated before answering. "Dad, I saw the news release," he said. His tone wasn't sharp this time, it was something softer, almost proud. "You're making waves. The good kind, I hope." "Maybe," he said, and she could almost hear his smile. "Your grandfather would have liked what you're doing. He believed in second chances." She swallowed. "I wasn't sure you did." "I didn't," he admitted. "But you made me reconsider. That man, Carter, he must be something." "He is," she said simply. "He's the reason this exists." "Then don't lose him," Richard said. "Not everyone in this business reminds you who you are." She didn't know how to respond. For once, silence between them felt comfortable. After hanging up, she stood at the edge of the terrace, watching the sun set behind the skyscrapers. Daniel joined her a moment later, hands in his pockets. "You look like you're thinking too hard," he said. "That obvious?" "You've got that boardroom stare again." She smiled. "I just got off the phone with my father. He said he was proud." "That's rare?" "You have no idea." "Well, maybe you earned it." "No," she said softly. "I think I finally understand it." The air between them felt lighter, charged in a way neither of them spoke aloud. For a moment, it wasn't CEO and courier, it was just two people who had pulled each other out of the wreckage of pride. "So, after all this," Daniel said, "what's next?" "Keep going," she replied. "Keep proving that decency isn't weakness. You'll have a fight ahead." "I know, but you'll win," he said, "because you don't fight for yourself anymore." She met his gaze, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. "You make that sound like a compliment." "It is," he said. The following week, the rooftop buzzed with energy. Journalists mingled with trainees. Speeches echoed through microphones. Daniel stood near the edge, watching it all unfold. Zoe and Miles clung to his hands, wide-eyed at the crowd. Caroline took the stage, her voice carrying steady and clear. "A year ago, this hotel made headlines for all the wrong reasons," she began. "And it should have. Because I forgot something fundamental, that every person has worth, whether they wear a uniform, a suit, or carry a box through the rain. Today we open our doors again, not to guests, but to opportunity. Because respect isn't charity, it's justice." The applause rose like a wave. Cameras flashed, but Daniel wasn't watching them, he was watching her. And in that moment, he didn't see the woman who'd once looked at him like he was nothing. He saw the one who'd fought her way back to being someone. After the speeches, Caroline found him near the buffet, where Zoe and Miles were devouring cupcakes. "Your kids are amazing," she said. "They're honest," he replied. "Harder to impress than most executives." "Then I'll take that as a challenge. You already passed." They shared a quiet laugh. Around them, the city glowed like a promise. For once, the noise felt right alive, forgiving. Caroline turned to him, her voice low. "You know, I used to think power was control, but it's not. It's care. You can't build anything worth keeping if you don't care." Daniel nodded. "And now you do." "Because someone showed me what it looked like," she said. "I just never said thank you properly." "You did," he said. "Every time you opened a door." When they shook hands that night, it wasn't formal. It was a quiet affirmation between equals, a gesture of closure and of beginning. Later, as the rooftop lights dimmed and the last guests left, Caroline lingered at the railing, looking out over the city. She whispered to herself, "Gasoline and sweat, that's what keeps the world turning." And somewhere down on the streets below, Daniel drove home beneath the same sky, unaware that the woman who once dismissed him now carried his lesson like a heartbeat, steady, strong, and unforgetting. Summer settled over New York like a soft, golden weight. The days stretched longer, the nights hummed warmer, and the city pulsed with that particular kind of energy only July could bring. The Grand Empress was thriving, fully booked, alive with laughter and footsteps. But inside Caroline, a quieter story was unfolding. For months, she and Daniel had worked side by side on the community program, turning it from an idea into a living thing. They'd spent late nights reviewing applications, early mornings meeting with sponsors, and countless hours listening to the stories of those they helped. She began to look forward to those moments, not the meetings, but the conversations that filled the spaces between. Daniel had a way of making everything human again. He didn't lecture, didn't try to impress. He simply existed in truth, and for a woman who'd built her life on pretense, that truth became oxygen. Yet, the world beyond them was not so easily tamed. Whispers began again in the boardroom, rumors about favoritism, about how the delivery man was becoming too close to the CEO. The old guard of executives didn't like what they couldn't control. They questioned her leadership, her motives, her judgment. "You're risking everything you rebuilt," her advisor warned. Caroline kept her face calm, her tone even. "I'm not risking anything. I'm investing in something that matters." Still, the doubt lingered like smoke in the air. One evening, after another long day, she stepped into her office to find her father waiting. He was reading a report, his brows drawn tight. "You're making enemies," he said without preamble. "They were never my friends," she replied. "The board thinks you're distracted," he continued. "They're saying this project is more about guilt than leadership. It's about decency," she said. "Something they wouldn't recognize if it walked into the room." He sighed, folding his arms. "And Carter?" The name came out heavy, weighted with meaning. "What about him?" she asked. "You trust him?" "Completely." Richard studied her. "Trust can build an empire, or destroy one. Make sure you know what you're doing." She met his eyes, unflinching. "I do." That night, she found herself driving without destination. The streets blurred past, and somehow, she ended up in Harlem. The small apartment building stood quiet under the streetlights. She almost turned back, but before she could, the front door opened, and Daniel stepped out with Zoe and Miles, ice cream cones in hand. He looked surprised to see her car, then smiled that easy, honest smile that disarmed her every time. "You stalking us now, Miss Sandoval?" he teased lightly. She laughed, stepping out. "Coincidence. I just needed air." "You picked the right block," he said. "We're celebrating." Miles didn't spill his ice cream for the first time. The boy grinned proudly, holding up the cone. "See? Not a drop." "That's impressive," Caroline said. "You might have a future in logistics," Zoe giggled. "Daddy says that's what he does, logistics, but I think he's just a hero." Daniel chuckled. "She exaggerates." "I don't think she does," Caroline said softly. He looked at her, surprised by the warmth in her tone. For a moment, time slowed. The streetlights painted them both in amber light, the kind that makes truth easier to say. "You want to come up?" he asked after a pause. "It's not a penthouse, but the view's honest." She hesitated, then nodded. His apartment was small but alive. The walls were lined with Zoe's drawings, each one full of color and joy. The air smelled faintly of detergent and cinnamon. On the table sat a half-finished puzzle. "It's not much," Daniel said, embarrassed. "It's home," she replied, and something about the way she said it made his shoulders relax. They talked while the kids watched a cartoon, about work, life, the weight of expectations. At one point, she said quietly, "You ever think some people get so high up they forget the ground?" "Every day," he said. "But you climbed back down. That's what matters. Sometimes I wonder if I deserve the chance to." "You earned it," he said simply. "Not because you're perfect, but because you tried." She smiled, and for a moment, the world outside didn't exist. Later, as she left, Zoe ran up and hugged her. "Come back soon," the girl said. Caroline's throat tightened. "I will." On the drive home, she couldn't stop thinking about the warmth of that small apartment, the laughter, the life pulsing in every corner. It felt more real than anything her money had ever bought. The next week brought new challenges. An anonymous email was sent to the board photos of Caroline leaving Daniel's building late at night, twisted into scandalous implication. The press caught wind. Headlines reappeared. CEO's secret relationship with former delivery driver. The gossip burned hot and fast. The board demanded a meeting. "This is unacceptable," one member barked. "You've jeopardized the company's image again." "There's nothing inappropriate about friendship," she said calmly. "It's not friendship the press sees," another sneered. "They see weakness." "No," she said, voice rising. "They see humanity. And if that scares you, maybe you're in the wrong business." The room went silent. Even her father, seated at the end, didn't interrupt. When the meeting ended, she stepped out, her pulse steady. Outside, Daniel was waiting. He'd heard. "You don't have to defend me," he said quietly. "They'll twist it anyway." "Let them," she said. "Truth doesn't break under noise." He searched her eyes, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them. "This could cost you everything." "Then it's worth something," she replied. That night, as the city roared around them, they stood side by side on the steps of the hotel, not as CEO and worker, not as scandal and defense, but as two people who had already walked through fire and come out the other side. For the first time in a long time, Caroline felt peace, not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind born from standing for what's right, no matter who's watching. Autumn came quietly, turning the edges of the city gold. Leaves drifted through the air like tired confessions, landing softly on the sidewalks outside the Grand Empress. Inside, everything was still, but beneath the surface, a storm was waiting. The fallout from the photos hadn't ended, it had only gone silent. The board had launched an internal review, the press had cooled, but the whispers remained. Caroline kept her posture calm in public, but her nights grew longer, her sleep shorter. She didn't regret what she'd done, but she knew she was walking a thin line. Power had its price, and decency always collected interest. Daniel, on the other hand, carried on as if nothing had changed. He refused to hide. His days were spent managing the new training program, his nights with Zoe and Miles. He'd grown used to being recognized. Some people called him the man who stood up to the CEO, others, the man who saved her. Both titles made him uncomfortable. He hadn't done it for glory. He'd done it because it was right. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Caroline found herself standing outside his building again. No cameras this time. No reason except the ache of needing to talk to someone who saw her as more than the mistake she'd made. He opened the door, surprised but not displeased. "Rough day?" he asked. "Every day's rough lately," she smiled faintly. "I needed a place where I don't have to perform." He gestured for her to come in. "You know the way." She sat on the couch while Zoe and Miles played quietly in the corner. The apartment glowed with soft lamplight, the kind that made everything feel real. "They're getting big," she said, watching the kids. "Zoe started reading chapter books," he said proudly. "Miles wants to be a firefighter. Said he likes running toward trouble." She smiled. "Takes after his dad." "I hope not too much," he said. "Trouble has a way of finding me. You and me both." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the city leaking through the windows. "They're trying to push me out," she said quietly. Daniel looked up. "The board? They won't say it outright, but it's coming. I'm too much of a liability now. Because of me, because of what I represent. Change scares people who profit from staying the same." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "So what will you do?" "Fight," she said, Not for my position, just for what we built. This program means something. I can't let them bury it." He nodded slowly. "You've come a long way from the woman who kicked me out of a lobby." "Don't remind me," she said with a wry smile. "That woman deserved to lose everything." "Maybe she did," he said, "but the one sitting here doesn't." The words landed heavier than he intended. She looked at him, eyes glinting in the low light. "You really believe that?" "Yeah," he said, "because I've seen who you are when no one's watching." Her throat tightened. "And what do you see? Someone trying to make things right. That's more than most." Before she could respond, Zoe ran up holding a drawing. "Look," she said proudly. It was of two figures standing under a big blue sky, one in a suit, one in a work uniform. Above them, in shaky letters, she'd written, "Good people fix the world." Caroline stared at it, speechless. "That's beautiful, Zoe," she said softly. "It's you and Daddy," the girl said. "You both fix stuff. You make things better." Daniel smiled, his eyes warm. Caroline felt something stir in her chest, a fragile mix of pride, sorrow, and gratitude. She reached out and gently touched the paper. "Thank you," she whispered. Later, after the kids had gone to bed, Caroline stood by the window. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think I was saving this place, the hotel, the reputation, all of it. But maybe it was saving me." "Maybe it still is," Daniel said. "Every good fight changes both sides." "You sound like my father," she said, laughing softly. "He told me once that power means responsibility." "He's right," Daniel said. "But responsibility doesn't mean control. It means care." She turned to look at him. "You've said that before." "Because it's true." They stood there in silence, two people from different worlds who somehow spoke the same language now. When she left that night, she paused at the door. "Daniel," she said, "if they fire me, if this all collapses, I want you to keep the program alive." "Caroline, promise me," she insisted. "You built it as much as I did." He nodded slowly. "I promise." 2 weeks later, the board made their move. A formal vote. Loss of public confidence, they called it. A change in leadership. The decision was unanimous except for her father, who abstained, his silence both punishment and protection. Caroline packed her office the next morning, every movement deliberate, steady, no tears, no bitterness. She knew this day would come. What she hadn't expected was the line of employees waiting outside her door. Rosa was first, eyes bright with tears. "You changed this place," she said. "Don't let them make you forget that." Esteban pressed her hand. "The doors stay open because of you." One by one, they came housekeepers, clerks, porters, people who once feared her, now thanking her. And at the end of the line stood Daniel. He said nothing, just handed her a folded piece of paper. It was a note. "Respect begins at every door." Her handwriting. She smiled, a single tear breaking free. "You kept it. You gave it," he said. As she walked through the lobby for the last time, sunlight poured through the glass ceiling, the same place where everything had begun. But now, every face she passed met her eyes not with judgment, but with gratitude. When she reached the doors, Daniel was there, holding them open. She paused, looking at him. "The back door or the front?" he asked quietly. She smiled. "This time, they're the same." She stepped out into the crisp autumn air, leaving behind marble and scandal, but taking with her something more lasting. And Daniel watched her go, knowing that some stories don't end, they evolve. For once, the woman who had lived her whole life above others had found her place among them. And in doing so, she had become something she'd never been before, free. Winter returned, sharp and clean, the kind of cold that made breath visible and honesty easier. 3 months had passed since Caroline walked out of the Grand Empress for the last time. The newspapers had moved on, the city had forgotten, but the people inside the hotel hadn't. Her name still drifted through the halls in whispers, some sad, some proud. Meanwhile, she had vanished from the public eye. No interviews, no statements, no carefully curated redemption arc. She disappeared the way tired souls do, quietly, deliberately. Daniel hadn't seen her since that day. At first, he thought it was intentional, her way of drawing a line between what had been and what needed to be left behind. But every now and then, as he walked through the training center they had built together, he caught himself expecting to see her there, watching from the back of the room, a faint smile in her eyes. The program had flourished despite her absence. It had grown into something bigger than either of them could have imagined, part school, part sanctuary. Delivery workers, janitors, single mothers, veterans, people who'd been dismissed, ignored, or overlooked, now stood taller because of the chance she had created. Daniel oversaw it all, quietly proud, quietly haunted. One Friday evening, after the last group had gone home, he stayed behind to lock up. Snow had begun to fall outside, turning Harlem into a watercolor of white and gold. He was about to switch off the lights when he heard a familiar voice. "You still working after hours, Mr. Carter?" He turned. Caroline stood at the doorway, her hair tucked beneath a wool hat, her coat dusted with snow. For a second, he thought she was an illusion, something his mind had conjured in the quiet. But then she smiled, and he knew it was real. "I didn't expect to see you," he said. "Most people don't," she replied. "Can I come in?" "You don't have to ask." She stepped inside, glancing around. The place looked different now, posters, awards, laughter etched into the walls. "You did it," she said softly. "You kept it alive." "We kept it alive," he corrected. "You built the foundation." She nodded. "I've been following the reports. Enrollment's doubled. There's talk of expanding to other cities. We've had offers," he said. "But I wanted to wait. Didn't feel right to move forward without you." She looked at him, touched by the quiet loyalty in his voice. "I didn't think you'd want me involved again." "I didn't say that," he replied. "I just didn't know if you wanted to be." She exhaled, a cloud of white breath. "After they pushed me out, I needed time. I had to figure out who I was without the hotel. For most of my life, my worth came from a title, a penthouse, a name. And when all that vanished, I realized I'd been standing on air." "So where are you standing now?" he asked gently. "On the ground," she said. "It's steadier than I thought." They both laughed, a sound that felt like warmth in the middle of the winter. "What about you?" she asked. "How's life treating you?" "Busy," he said. "Good busy. The kids are growing fast. Zoe wants to be a writer. Miles, he's still trying to save the world one Lego block at a time." "You're raising good people," she said. "Trying to," he answered. "But they're the ones raising me." She smiled at that. "You know, I used to think leadership meant being above others. Now I think it's about lifting people until you're standing beside them." "You figured it out," he said. "That's the thing," she replied. "You never really figure it out. You just learn to listen better." She paused, her gaze drifting toward the window. Outside, snow kept falling, soft and endless. "I came here tonight to tell you something," she said. "I've been offered a position in Chicago. A non-profit organization wants me to run their community development division." He blinked. "That's big." "It is," she said. "It's everything I used to dream about, only this time, for the right reasons." "You're taking it?" "I think so," she said quietly. "But I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye." The word goodbye felt heavy between them. "You don't owe me that," he said. "Maybe not," she replied. "But I owe myself the truth. Everything I built, everything I learned, it all started the day I tried to humiliate you and you refused to let me." "That wasn't courage," he said. "It was exhaustion. I was tired of letting people decide who mattered." "Maybe," she said. "But that moment changed both of us." They stood in silence, the room glowing under the dim lights. Then she stepped closer. "You know what's funny?" she said softly. "For years, I thought you were the reminder I didn't need. But you turned out to be the compass I couldn't live without." He didn't answer, just looked at her with that calm, grounded gaze she had come to rely on. "Promise me something," she said. "Whatever happens, don't stop doing this. Don't stop believing that dignity is worth fighting for." "I won't," he said. "You taught me that too." She smiled, eyes glistening. "Then I guess we're even." "Not quite," he said. "You still owe me a coffee, the one we never had that day on the roof." "Next time I'm in town," she said. "Deal?" "Deal." She started to leave, then turned back. "Daniel? Yeah? You were right, you know." "About what?" "Self. Respect. You can lose everything and still keep that. And if you do, you've lost nothing at all." With that, she stepped into the snow, the door closing softly behind her. He watched her walk away through the window, her figure fading into the white. For a long moment, he just stood there, listening to the hum of the city outside, feeling something like peace settle in his chest. He turned off the lights, locked the door, and stepped out into the night. The snow crunched beneath his boots, cold and clean. Somewhere, Far ahead, a woman who had once forgotten her humanity was learning how to build it again. And behind her, a man who had once been invisible now carried her lesson forward. The city swallowed them both, but their story remained etched in marble, in memory, in the quiet spaces where respect begins and redemption never truly ends. 2 years later, the world had turned and turned again, carrying the city through another cycle of seasons. The Grand Empress still stood tall, its marble walls gleaming under the morning light, but its soul was different now. The corridors carried laughter where tension used to live, and the employees moved with quiet pride. Near the entrance, a brass plaque gleamed beside the main door, the Sandoval Carter Initiative for Human Dignity. Below it, in smaller letters, "Respect begins at every door." It was Daniel's idea to include her name beside his, though she had protested. "It's not about us," she'd said. "It's about everyone who believes in second chances." He had smiled. "Exactly. And someone needs to remind them where it started." The story of Caroline Sandoval had become something of an urban legend. The fallen CEO who found grace not in power but in humility, the woman who rebuilt her purpose from the ashes of her pride. And while the city eventually found new scandals to gossip about, those who had worked under her never forgot. They told stories to new recruits about the day she stood up for a janitor, about how she treated everyone by name, about the moment she walked out of the hotel with her head held high, not in arrogance, but in peace. Meanwhile, across state lines, Chicago had become her new home. Her new office overlooked the river, not as grand as her Manhattan penthouse once had been, but more alive. Her work at the Community Foundation had expanded to neighborhoods long neglected, turning abandoned buildings into training centers, shelters, and classrooms. She wore simple clothes now, spoke with patience, and smiled more often. The board loved her results, the people loved her sincerity. Yet sometimes, when she walked home under the orange glow of streetlights, she still thought about New York, the hum of it, the faces, the man who had taught her what kindness really looked like, Daniel. He had stayed in the city, still running the program. They spoke occasionally short calls, updates about funding or new locations, never sentimental, always professional. But beneath the surface, there was a current neither could quite sever. One December afternoon, a letter arrived on his desk. The handwriting was neat, familiar. "Dear Daniel, Chicago is thriving, but something's missing here, a soul. I'm hosting an anniversary event for our first program. It would mean a lot if you came. Caroline." He read it twice, folded it carefully, and smiled. A week later, he was on a train heading west, the city unfolding behind him. When he arrived, snow was falling soft, slow, forgiving. The event was small but heartfelt, held in one of the restored community centers. The walls were lined with photographs, students learning trades, families smiling, volunteers shaking hands. Caroline stood at the front, greeting guests with the ease of someone who no longer needed to prove herself. When she saw him, her breath caught. He looked almost the same steady eyes, calm smile, that quiet strength she had once mistaken for defiance. "You came," she said, warmth threading through her voice. "You asked," he replied. "I don't ignore invitations from old friends." "Old?" she teased. "I'm barely wiser than I was 2 years ago." "Wiser's overrated," he said. "You learned grace. That's rarer." The evening unfolded beautifully. They spoke to donors, to former trainees, to people whose lives had been changed by what they started. As the crowd thinned, Caroline led him out to the courtyard, where a thin layer of snow covered the stone path. "You know," she said, "every time I start to doubt myself, I think about that night in the elevator." He smiled faintly. "That's not a great memory." "It is for me," she said, "because it was the first time I saw who you really were and who I wasn't yet." He looked at her, thoughtful. "And now? Now I'm trying to live up to that version of myself you saw before I did." "You already have," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, you gave me the mirror, Daniel. I just learned to stop looking away." A gentle silence fell between them. Snowflakes caught in her hair, the city lights flickering off the river in the distance. "I heard you've been offered a seat on the National Advisory Board," he said. "That's huge." "It is," she admitted, "but I told them I'd only take it if they committed to expanding programs in cities that don't get the spotlight. It's not about power anymore, it's about reach." Still the fighter, he said, smiling. You taught me that some battles are worth starting, even if you lose. You didn't lose, he said. You changed the rules. She looked at him then, long and steady, as if trying to memorize the moment. You ever think we were meant to cross paths? Every day, he said, because sometimes the people meant to break you are the same ones who put you back together just differently. She laughed softly, the sound fragile and strong all at once. Maybe that's our story. Gasoline and perfume. Sweat and silk, he added. Opposites that somehow make sense. They stood there a while longer, saying nothing. The wind carried faint sounds of music from inside, mingling with the quiet hum of the city. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but sure. You know, I used to want my name on everything I built. Now I just want the work to last longer than I do. It will, he said, because you built it for the right reasons. She smiled, eyes glistening. We built it. He nodded. We. A group of children ran past them, laughing, throwing snowballs. One little boy stopped, looked up at Caroline and said, "Are you the lady who made this place?" She crouched to his level, smiling. "No, sweetheart," she said. We all did. The boy grinned and ran off. Daniel watched her rise, the light from the building casting a halo over her shoulders. In that moment, she no longer looked like the woman who had once ruled from marble stairs. She looked human, luminous, real. "So," she said softly, turning to him, "where do we go from here?" "Wherever the next door opens," he said. "And this time," she replied with a gentle smile, "we walk through it together." He extended his hand, and she took it not as an ending, not as a beginning, but as a continuation of everything they had become. Snow kept falling, soft and endless, covering their footprints as they walked forward side by side. Somewhere above them, the city lights shimmered like forgiveness, and though no one watching from the windows knew their story, the world had quietly been changed by it. The story of a woman who learned humility, a man who lived by compassion, and the truth that somewhere between pride and pain lies redemption.